If you've been coding along with each of the lessons, you might notice at this point that things are a little sluggish when pressing buttons quickly or moving any of the axis controls. This is primarily due to the change I made in the previous lesson where I moved the gamepad.detectDevices call inside of the getConnectedControllerIDs function. Since each event handler inside of the controller module calls into the isXbox360controller function, and this function turns around and calls the getConnectedControllerIDs function, the gamepad.detectDevices call is being made every time a button is pressed or an axis is moved, in addition to being called every half a second, which is really just highly inefficient and unnecessary. To fix this, I'm going to maintain a list of the connected device IDs in an array, which will be updated with each call to update status, and can then be accessed by the isXbox360controller function. I'll call the new array connectedControllerIDs, and then add a new function called updateControllerIDs that will be responsible for maintaining this array. Now, just like with the status property I added in the previous lesson, I want to make sure the new array is maintained in near real time. Being that I'm already updating the status every half a second in the updateStatus function, and that function is already retrieving an array of connectedControllerIDs, I'm just going to have it call the new function here and pass it the array of IDs it retrieves. The point of the updateControllerIDs function is to update the array of connectedControllerIDs using the array of IDs passed into it. There are a few ways to go about this. You can just simply assign the new array passed in to the connectedControllerIDs variable and call it a day, in which case you really don't need a new function to do that. You can also add the items that are in the ControllerIDs array to connectedControllerIDs that are not already in the connectedControllerIDs array, and then remove the items that are in the connectedControllerIDs array but are not in the ControllerIDs array. That seems like a little much though. I'm actually going to take a hybrid approach, however, by assigning the ControllerIDs parameter to the connectedControllerIDs array after first checking for differences between the two arrays and emitting new events, connected and disconnected, with the IDs of the devices corresponding to each event. I think a little bit of code here will help clarify what I'm talking about. First, I'll just do a simple assignment to update the global connectedControllerIDs array, since it will be our source of truth for what controllers are currently connected to the system, and the ControllerIDs parameter will contain that information retrieved from the gamepad package. And then, I'll add two new local arrays that will contain the connected and disconnected device IDs so that we know when to emit the connected and disconnected events. In order to populate the connected IDs array, I need to look for IDs that are in the ControllerIDs parameter but are not in the connectedControllerIDs array. Essentially, we want to know which controllers have been connected since our last trip through this function. Since the connectedControllerIDs array contains the previously connected ControllerIDs, and the ControllerIDs parameter contains the most up-to-date information on the current connected controllers retrieved from gamepad, simply taking the difference between the two arrays will tell us which controllers have been connected since our last update. Our friend Lodash offers a way to do this very easily by calling the aptly named difference function. This function can take in multiple arrays where the first argument is the array to examine, and the other arguments are additional arrays containing values to exclude from the first array. The function then returns a new array containing values that are in the first array argument, but not in the additional arrays. I'm only dealing with two arrays here, so in order to determine which controllers have been recently connected, I will need to examine the ControllerIDs parameter and look for IDs that are not in the connectedControllerIDs array, so I will call the difference function with the ControllerIDs array as the first argument and the connectedControllerIDs array as the second argument. For determining which controllers were recently disconnected, I need to examine the connectedControllerIDs array and look for IDs that are not in the ControllerIDs array passed in. So in this case, I will call the same difference function, but reverse the arguments. I want to emit connected and disconnected events using each of the two new arrays, so that any consuming applications know which controllers were recently connected and disconnected from the system. If the connected IDs array contains any items, then I will emit a new connected event and pass the array of IDs as an argument. And then I will do the same for the disconnected event using the disconnected IDs array. The last thing I need to do in here before updating the test file to handle these new events is refactor the isXbox360controller function a bit to use the new global connectedControllerIDs array instead of calling the getConnectedControllerIDs function, which should boost performance quite a bit. Now I will head over to the test file and handle the new events by just logging the connected and disconnected IDs to the console. I should see IDs logged to the console corresponding to the controllers being turned on and off. Let's see what happens. The module has been initialized, so when I turn a controller on, I should see its ID logged. The output looks a little weird, as it says connected controllers: 0, but remember that this 0 is the device ID of the controller that was just turned on and does not represent the total number of controllers connected. And if I press some buttons and move the axis controls, you can see the other events are still firing properly. At this point too, you can see that the new events are pretty instantaneous since we made the controller module a lot more efficient. Alright, now if I turn on a second controller, I should see its ID logged to the console as well. And there it is with an ID of 1. Again, the output is a little misleading if you don't know what the numbers represent, so maybe the log message should have been something like connected device IDs. But I'll let you make that change if you like on your own. Alright, now let's make sure the disconnected event fires appropriately as well, so I'll turn off the first controller. And here we see the disconnected message with a controller ID of 0, which is the ID that was assigned to the first controller I turned on just a moment ago. Now if I turn off the second controller, we should see the same message with an ID of 1, and then we should see a status message indicating that all controllers have been turned off. There's the disconnected message, and immediately following that is the status message. Perfect. Alright, now that the module performs a lot better, and we know when controllers are connected and disconnected, I want to finish up this course by cleaning up the bogus output that is emitted from Gamepad as soon as a controller is turned on, so let's see how to do that.